Right now, there are two camps screaming at each other about AI. Camp 1 says this is the biggest infrastructure build-out in human history, the railroads of the 21st century, and anyone who doubts it will end up poor and sorry. Camp 2 says it's .com 2.0 with better marketing, and the whole thing pops any day now. I put this video off for months because, honestly, the shouting was unbearable. But here's the thing. Both camps are arguing the wrong question. Because while they were yelling about whether AI is a bubble, the market quietly rewrote the rule for how it prices four of the biggest companies on Earth. And if you own an index fund, a 401k, basically any retirement account, you didn't get a vote. American stocks make up 64% of the global equity index. Whatever the market decides these four companies are worth, that decision lands on you. So let me show you what actually happened in 9 days at the end of July. But before I give you the number that broke Wall Street's brain, you need to see the scoreboard first. Because the scoreboard makes no sense until it suddenly does. July 22nd, Alphabet reports earnings. Revenue up 24%, Google Cloud up 82%. A backlog of signed cloud contracts worth $514 billion, up $50 billion in a single quarter. By every operating metric, a monster quarter. The stock got sold. Why? Because Alphabet also raised its 2026 spending plan to as much as $205 billion, and its free cash flow went negative, by one count for the first time in roughly 20 years. Read that again. A company growing 24% got punished for spending money. July 29th, Microsoft. Azure up 43%, crossing $100 billion in annual revenue for the first time. The stock jumped almost 9% after hours. The magic trick? Microsoft told investors next year's capital spending plus leases would come in around $175 billion, roughly $15 billion less than expected. Spend less, get rewarded. Makes sense, right? Hold that thought, because that $15 billion is about to get very interesting. Same day Meta beat on revenue, missed on earnings, and nudged the bottom of its spending range, up by just $5 billion, the smallest increase of the four. It fell almost 10%, the worst reaction of the week. July 30th, Amazon raised its spending plan by a full $20 billion to about $220 billion, the biggest number of the four. The stock jumped more than 8%. So, biggest raise, rewarded. Smallest raise, punished. A cut that isn't a cut, rewarded. A great quarter, punished. That's not chaos. That's a new rule. The market has stopped paying for capital spending as proof of demand. It now pays only when the spending is already matched to revenue you can see. Amazon showed AWS accelerating to 37% growth, its fastest in 18 quarters, with margins expanding toward 39%. Alphabet showed a negative free cash flow line. Same kind of money, opposite verdicts. Add the four plans together and the ceiling comes to roughly $750 billion for 2026, against a bit over $400 billion last year. That's about $2 billion a day, which means in the time it takes you to watch this video, these four companies will spend somewhere around another $20 million. Now, about Microsoft's $15 billion cut. Lean in, because this is the part the headline skipped. Microsoft didn't cut anything. It announced two accounting changes. First, office and data center buildings, which used to be depreciated over 15 years, will now be depreciated over 25 to. Second, more future data center leases get reclassified from finance leases. which count as capital spending, into operating leases, which don't. The CFO, Amy Hood, said it out loud on the call. Excluding the accounting effect, the actual 2026 spending plan is unchanged. Translation: not $1 less leaves the building. The number just looks smaller on the page. It's like deciding your car will last 25 years instead of 15. The monthly cost on paper drops, but the car is the same car. And the market bought it, an 8.88% after-hours pop. Partly for Azure, and partly, let's be honest, for a smaller number that isn't actually smaller. And this isn't the industry's first round with the clock. Back in 2022 and 2023, Microsoft, Alphabet, and Meta all stretched the accounting life of their servers from around 4 years to 6, which by one estimate saves the Big Five about $18 billion a year in depreciation, money that flows straight into reported profit. Amazon, interestingly, went the other way in 2025 and shortened some server lives to 5 years, taking the profit hit. Same industry, same machines, opposite judgments. Which tells you something nobody wants to say on an earnings call. Nobody actually knows how long an AI chip stays useful. And that one unknown number is quietly shaping what these companies' profits look like. Michael Burry, yes, the Big Short guy, has bought put options on exactly this thesis. Not that AI is fake. That the depreciation math is flattering the earnings. Okay, so the spending is real even when the reporting is creative. Next question. Where's the money coming from? Because this is where the story changes species. For 20 years, these four were cash machines. They funded everything from operating cash flow and carried more cash than debt. Wall Street literally paid a premium for the fact that they never needed to borrow. That era is ending in real time. By one estimate, the big hyperscalers will pour about 90% of their operating cash flow into capital spending in 2026, up from 65% the year before. A company that spends 9 of every $10 it generates on machinery is not a software company anymore. It's a utility with better branding. And when cash flow isn't enough, you borrow. Hyperscaler bond issuance jumped 5-fold in 2025 to $120 billion. Meta, the company famous for a fortress balance sheet, financed a $27 billion data center campus in Louisiana through a special purpose vehicle it owns just 20% of, which conveniently keeps most of that debt off its own books. Meta's long-term debt now sits at $84 billion against $90 billion in cash. The old net cash badge is basically gone. And its quarterly free cash flow? $784 million on $61 billion in revenue. That's barely a penny of free cash per dollar of sales. Here's the part that should actually get your attention. The bond market noticed first. Investors are demanding yields above 7% on Meta's newest data center bond, meaningfully worse terms than a year ago. CoreWeave, a debt-fueled AI cloud, saw its credit default swaps price in roughly a 50% chance of default. The cost of insuring Oracle's debt has jumped by about half. Stock investors argue about narratives. Bond investors just quietly raise the price of money. And when the loud market and the quiet market disagree, you watch the quiet one. Now for the twist almost nobody is pricing in. A chunk of that $750 billion isn't buying more computing power at all. It's buying the same computing power at higher prices. Memory chips, the boring RAM inside every AI server, have gone vertical. DRAM spot prices are up nearly 700% in a year because manufacturers shifted their factories to high-bandwidth memory for AI and starved everything else. Memory is on track to eat about 30% of hyperscaler capital budgets in 2026, up from 8% 2 years ago. Amazon flat out said its $20 billion raise was partly just memory getting more expensive. Electricity is doing the same dance. One major U.S. grid market saw capacity prices jump 833% between delivery years. And new projects wait 5 to 7 years just to plug in. Which means the scariest stat of 2026, spending up 77%, has inflation folded inside it. That's bad news for both camps, by the way. If you're a bull, it means the money buys less capacity than you think, so the payback takes longer. If you're a bear, it means this looks less like the year 2000. Too much fiber, too much supply, and more like an old-fashioned cost squeeze. Those are very different movies with very different endings. And then there's the number I'd call the most honest disclosure of the entire earnings season. Microsoft's book of signed future contracts grew 84% to $678 billion. Spectacular. But Microsoft also told you, strip out one customer, OpenAI, and that growth drops to 25%. One customer is the difference between historic boom and pretty good year. And that customer has committed to roughly $1.4 trillion of computing purchases on annualized revenue of about $25 billion, a company promising to spend more than 50 times what it currently makes. The combined $1.7 trillion of order backlogs across these giants are promises, not cash. And promises are only as good as the borrower's next funding round. So is it a bubble? Honest answer, that's the wrong question. And deep down, both camps know it. Because the two strongest facts in this whole story point in opposite directions, and both are true. Fact 1, the cloud is genuinely sold out. Amazon says even at $220 billion it can't meet demand. Its 2027 capacity is essentially booked, and some 2028 capacity is already claimed. And AWS margins are expanding while it grows, which you cannot fake. Fact 2, the buyers aren't making money yet. Only 29% of enterprises report meaningful returns from generative AI, and one MIT study found 95% of corporate AI pilots produced zero measurable profit impact. The sellers of compute are drowning in demand, and the buyers of compute are still waiting for the payoff. Both true at once. The entire trillion-dollar argument lives in the gap between those two sentences. And that gap is measured in time, not in truth. Which brings this back to your money. Household stock exposure relative to income has doubled since 2010. The BIS, the central bank of central banks, not exactly a doom-posting YouTuber, is now comparing this build-out to the canal mania and the railway mania. And it points out that those episodes ended in economy-wide recessions. Not because canals were fake, because the financing ran out before the traffic showed up. For 20 years, the market paid these four companies a premium for one specific superpower. They never needed anyone's money. As of 9 days in July, that superpower is gone. Meta's debt has caught up to its cash. Alphabet's free cash flow went negative. Amazon's has been negative for a year. Microsoft is stretching building lifespans to keep the numbers polite. The debate you're watching was never really about whether AI works. Almost everyone agrees it does. It's about the market slowly repricing the most profitable software companies in history into something much older and much heavier, utilities. And utilities don't get software multiples. The bubble question will get answered eventually. The repricing already started, quietly, while everyone was busy arguing.